Welcome to the RS2G podcast, where I motivate, inspire listeners by discussing failures, success, and the journey of a rebirth. If you are someone who wants to hear the honest truth from a host that puts his right hand to God, as I interview people who have built empires and sometimes watched them crumble as their lives have taken an unexpected twists and turns, this podcast is for you. Life is not always easy. And as a combat military veteran, active military for 14 years, I know about sacrifice and facing fears and true loyalty. I can't wait to take you on this rebirth journey with myself and my guests as we discuss life and living with your right hand to God. Boom.
It's a capsule.
Welcome to the RH2G podcast, where we motivate and inspire. And we got a special guest today. We got Mr. Alex Harris from Redefined Mindset, all the way from Long Beach, California. But this is my uncle, so we got a real deep conversation we about to talk about. I'm happy to have you. What's going on?
Man, you know how it is.
Let's get it in.
You doing it.
Let's get it in, man.
Motivator.
Definitely, man. I wanted to always sit down and have a methodical conversation with you, because you was always one of them ones when I was little that was very intellectual. A lot of people from the hood don't understand that outside the hood, they don't know there's a very special kind of person inside of them neighborhoods that are very intellectual, and you were always one of them. That's that's how I learned how to speak, how to handle myself. Yeah, we still grew up around a lot of gangsters, but we understand how to talk and speak to each other, because your father, my grandfather, had a doctor in theology. He was known in the city. He ran for a lot of boards. Can you tell me about where we came from?
Well, we being that I am the uncle, it is really unique. I remember when you had your issues and we were talking about the military, and I was on active duty at that time, and we had that talk, and you was like, we had some issues, and I was like, man, you better go take yourself to the military, man. Get up out of there. The city isn't going to change, and so that's proven by the influence in the way you've grown, and so how do we do that? You have to have vision and influence, right? So I know I didn't want to die in the neighborhood, right, especially where we're from, with so much crime and things that are going on like that. It just wasn't for me. And so my motivation was law enforcement. It was either be in the hood or be counter to that. But after you start seeing a lot of the neighborhood fools that you grew up with, things that's going on, and the way the subculture creates, I knew I didn't want to be part of that. And I sure didn't want to be a victim and dying of that. Right. Like we've both have seen, even our own family, with my sister, your mom, some of the victimology that comes from out of that culture environment. And so I said I wanted to do something. And so I got mentored by some folks in the fire department who kind of brought me on. And that's when I started learning how to picture myself outside of our normal realm. Right. But what I also understood was the handicaps that I had, being dyslexic, had a lot of learning issues. So when I got my bachelor's degree, it took me 10 years because I was so self-sufficient academically. So it drove me to want to do better. It was just harder, and that's where resilience come in, right? So when we start looking about progressing of yourself and having a vision, and how do we get there? And that's why I'm big on acceptance, because you have to accept where you're at. I mean, you don't have to like it, you don't have to agree with it, but you have to accept where you're at. Right. Now you get to choose how you navigate through that. Right. Now you can be negatively influenced, or you can be positively influenced. Right. And a lot of dudes who are negatively influenced get into the gangs, the street mentality, and a lot of destructive, interpersonal destructive as well, physical destructive behaviors. Because in reality, we just don't know better, right? Because we don't have many influences to say, oh, by the way, this is the way you can do it. And then you got to deal with ego and education. Some people just don't have the education or the mental capacity to see past where they're at. And you can't do that until you start getting influence, right? I mean, everyone sees a boat on the water, but it's completely different to own one, be on one, and be on the water trying to operate one. Right. So Captain. That's what made me really want to do something different. And as I got into law enforcement, my point was really to serve the neighborhood. And that's what I did. I served in the city. I'm from the city. I worked in the city. And then after that, went into, federal law enforcement, where I spent my last 17 years. And when I got into that, I got to see a different side of law enforcement that I really didn't like. And you can see the race and culture issues internally. And then you can also see the race and issues that are externally.
Okay.
And then especially being African-American in senior leadership in law enforcement, it's almost a double-edged sword, because now you're the man, the hood looking at you like you're the police.
Right.
But then you're in this organizations that's not really pro-minority influenced.
No support.
So they're very limited. Yeah. You kind of got to know someone who knows someone who's willing to pull you through.
Right.
Or someone that may not be in your culture per se, a white guy to a black guy, vice versa, to saying, hey, let me show you some things.
Right.
And so when I got to that point, all I wanted to do was learn more and more, because I was like, hey, I know I didn't want to be poor. I know I didn't want to retire young. And how do you do that? And that all comes back to what my whole thing is about transformational mindset and transformational leadership. Because you have to have a shifting of the mind, and that shifting has to come from some stimulus.
Right.
But how do we create that stimulus when it's non-existent? So we have to create that exposure. Just like with you was exposed to the military very young, and you were exposed to a lot of drama dealing with the military that it comes with,
Right.
But then what do you do after that?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of vets struggle, because they lose their identity. And it's just like being a police officer in law enforcement. Your pseudo self takes over your true self. And so when you're wearing a badge, when you're wearing a uniform, at the end of the day, you're just an actor. And I used to teach a lot of my guys that when you're wearing the uniform and wearing the badge, all you are is an actor. You're no different than Tom Cruise. So Tom Cruise portrays this great, like in Top Gun, this great fighter pilot. He's going to save America. But once those cameras are off, he takes all that uniform off and becomes his true self. So the same thing is with law enforcement. We take off that badge, we take off our uniform, and that transition happens in the locker room, right? And you're like, okay, now let me be myself. Let me put my clothes on, my shoes, and walk out of here. The problem is you live the pseudo self so long in this acting role that it takes over your true self. And then that's where you start having the dilemmas like I had to deal with mental health, alcohol abuse, and dealing with the PTSD that comes behind that kind of career and things you deal with on top of the military, going on top of that stuff. So that got me to the point where I found myself in rehab. I even got arrested, which was a very unique thing to be in law enforcement and arrested, going through a crisis, right? And so it's like, how do you get out of that? And that's one of the things I speak about when we talk about hope and fear, like we were spoken about in one of our lectures that we got to do, what I got to do with you. And there are a lot of key words in life that people don't focus on that really could help them.
Right.
And influence, hope, desires. How do you develop that? Especially when you come from nothing, right? Like you got someone struggling, they've been in the hood all their life, their mom's in the hood, and it's this cycle doesn't stop. And in our family, personally, we're one of the beginning generations that's really stopping or impacting some of the curses. I don't know if I'm going to call them curse, but normalcies in our subculture, even in our own family.
Right.
And then that becomes a challenge because now your family is looking at you kind of goofy because now you're different to them.
Right. It's different.
You know what I'm saying? And then it creates a superiority, inferiority thing, and it's not that. It's just about how do we progress and change this evolution that we've been in for so long.
And that's why I want to touch on that, because I'm glad that you said all that, because you show the world, who you are and what the understanding is coming from Long Beach, California, and how the ideology is growing up there and how we made it out. And my question to you is, as a kid, when did you know you wanted to do what you're doing right now with the Redefined Mindset? Because it's an interesting name, but it's also redefining who you are, because you're coming from something that made you, that said that we was only supposed to be this in Long Beach, and you just surpassed it. Family members look at us different. Everybody's curious, but now we made it to a point to where, hey, is he crazy or is this the way? And we are both there at the same crossroads. So who were you as a kid growing up?
So when I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be a police officer at 6 years old.
At 6. I remember you used to bend my arms back and break my.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you doing this to me? Why are you trying me?
I've been in martial arts, in and out. But you took it to another level. But that was which is fascinating. But that's what creates it, right? It's just like, yes, I've always done that. You know me as a kid. I'm always, if I can tie someone up, I'm just like, man, that's cool. But which is not cool later on when you go through a mental health crisis and someone like threatens you and you're just like, oh, by the way, I can, oh no, I'm Superman too. And you pull out your little cape and you're like, hey, you're like, you Superman? Yeah. I want to do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so, and then that's where the mindset comes in, and then training kicks in, which could be good and bad, because then you're like, oh, I could deal with that. Yeah. Then you're like, then the hood wants to kick in and go, hey, by the way, I'm not that same person either.
Right, yeah.
So the balance of that is really tough, even in a professional setting, a non-professional setting, and as you develop and grow, because those sides of you are still your true self.
Right.
And how do you balance that is real difficult. And so when I became involved with like Police Explorers and other things to extract me out of the environment of what I was in, I knew what all the people that were dying around me and us in our neighborhood and friends that our own relatives, I knew that couldn't be in business. I was like, no, this is, not cool. And then when I think I was 15 when, we had the first multiple shooting that I got to see and be part of. And I was like, yeah, I'm cool on that. And to this day, that stuck with me. And so I don't remember a lot about my career and things that I've been in, because I'm very desensitized. After a while, you go to enough shootings, you go to enough crime scenes, enough violence, it just becomes just like the military. You get kind of used to it. Yeah. Right? It's like, oh, incoming. Let's go duck, do what I got to do. Yeah. Did everyone live? Okay, then it's like, now let's go. Yeah. Right? So it's the same thing, just in a different way. But the first responders are very underprivileged. Serve, what I mean by that. And what I mean is, in the military, it's kind of a secondary byproduct that's accepted and known. Like, oh, you're going to the military, you've deployed, you've done things, you might have PTSD, right? Like, okay. But if you're in a career like in law enforcement, it goes, oh, by the way, I have this mental illness, then you're like, oh, well, maybe that means you shouldn't be working again. Right. So now what happens, we have a lot of these guys who have mental health issues that are going on, and they're responding to mental health issues, and they're in crisis themselves.
That's crazy that you talk about that, because a lot of people that go into the police force are retired military. And on that application, especially in that 10 to 20 year span of right now, we were all involved in some type of conflict in Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring. I did 3 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. When I got out, I was heavily recruited. That's why I moved to Florida, because I almost went to do the what was that down there in Miami, that does the drugs.
DEA. Yeah, I know you were looking at that. And I knew you were looking at Dallas Police too. I remember
heavily recruited, but not knowing that, like I said on Saturday, I need to put the mask on myself, because how am I going to respond to people on mental health, and I'm dealing with mental health issues. So I'm dealing with contact and all these combat engagements, and then I'm on the street with as a police officer, trying to protect and serve, but it might be one incident that erupts me that I have a flashback. And that's what's going on, I think, in the police situation. Can you elaborate on that?
That is true. I remember on the call, I think there's one vividly that I remember where I kind of lost my mind. I had responded to a incomplete 911 call. So automatically as a police, you got to go there, right? Yeah. So I go there, and we're off PCH. And so I go into this house, and this lady answered the door, and she literally slams it within seconds. It was like what she said was, "Oh shit, it's police," right? And she slams the door. But our training, our tactics, I put my foot in the door, and I was like, nah, that's not going to work. So I forced my way in, and it was a couple 18 streeters. It was just a little Hispanic gang hangout, and they were smoking rock cocaine. Some of them had heroin, and then there was a newborn baby on the couch. And so when I came in, the mom started freaking out about grabbing the baby. So I got these guys at gunpoint. I'm getting on the radio. I'm like, hey, give me some assistance here. It's about 4 people. And I got one guy stoned out, bumping his head in the closet because I think he was on PCP or LSD. And the chick started tripping about her baby and started grabbing her baby and was like, you can't take her. And I'm like, I don't know what in the heck is going on, right? So as I'm like, hey, don't move. Hey, don't you move either. I'm just waiting for people to come. I noticed this baby looks like a blueberry. That's literally in my head. It looks like a blueberry muffin. I'm like, something's wrong with this baby. And as I edged closer to her, because I want to make sure she didn't have nothing in this couch or whatever, I could see the baby was very abused, very abused. And I called him the blueberry because he had bruises all over his body, and the baby was probably about 2 months old. And I told her, hey, put the baby down, this and that, and that became an issue. And she started grabbing the baby by the face. And so I got distracted, and I was like, no, you can't do that. So I don't know what happened, but I got on the radio, and I asked for help, and apparently I was crying. And I didn't know that until my supervisor came in and a few other guys who came pretty quickly. And we ended up tussling with this lady. And the crazy part is she was about 115 pounds, maybe about 5'1", 5'2". And it took about 6 of us to fight her. And she walked out with some injuries from use of force. And ultimately, get this baby, and the paramedics come, and this baby is bleeding from his rectum in his diaper and everything. And mentally, it got to me where these guys were talking out of their mind, and I was like, I just kind of lost it, and I was like, this is not good.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to like get in depth with it, but I was like, I got a gun on you. I'll tell you, I was like, this is not gonna, it's well. Not. This is not. And so I knew problematically there was gonna be an issue. Like right. I knew that.
Right.
But I just didn't recognize how my training kicked in and how I sounded. And then my supervisor was the first one there, and we got these guys, and so we kind of detained it till people get there, and then he pulled me to the side, took me outside, and he was like, are you okay? And the first thing I could think of, I was like, man, I was getting ready to kill this dude. And I was like, I couldn't help but this baby that's really damaged that we had to go put in the ICU. And it made me think about a lot of things, and I was like, I just went through a moment.
Right.
I mean, I don't really have an excuse for it.
Right.
Like it's the humanality, right? People think their cops aren't human, and they are. And what happens, you just get in these situations that make you respond because they're very abnormal, right? But when you live in the line of work I do, that abnormalcy really is normalcy.
Right.
And so how do you respond to that over a while? It just becomes, you don't even care about the adults. You're just like, oh, this baby's jacked up. And then you find out, this baby's been abused or whatever.
Wow.
And that's what kind of triggers you.
Right.
I think when you start getting into situations like that, and it causes you to, then the man comes out of you, right? I'm still
protector.
Right. I'm still like, hey, I don't give a dang about this job. Like, you can't do that to this baby, right?
Exactly.
And so you get a lot of those kind of things that happen, and each way to you. I remember the first homicide of a 3-year-old I was on. A father shot his kid in the head, but before he did that, he put tissue in the baby's ear. Now, the whole time, like, I'm on the scene, that's really sad. It is very sad to see these things, but I couldn't help to understand, like, why does the man put tissue in his ear? But here's the thing, it stunned everyone, because none of us was like, well, why would you do that? And you just don't know people's mindset, no matter how things are going, and how that transition was because he didn't want his kid's mom to have the baby because they had a visitation issue.
Right.
And so when you start seeing that in the neighborhood, you start seeing that every day, you start dealing with you're just after a while, it just kind of gets to you.
Right.
And then when you start moving up in senior leadership, and like for me, when I transferred out and went to the government and started moving up, you see things from a different angle.
Right.
And then you just like, wow, that's different.
Right.
And then you start seeing some of the political actions from the government.
Right.
And you're like,
playing with your
oh
mind.
yeah, this is like you've been
Yeah,
deployed, and
definitely.
there's some missions that people just don't know about.
A lot of them, and we don't talk about.
Right,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
just missions
Yeah.
that just like
Yeah, definitely.
it's kind of the same thing. So after a while, you start that pseudo self becomes part of your true self, and then you take it home because you can change your clothes, but you can't take your mind out of that. And then you go home and you end up. For me, my prescription was alcohol.
Alcohol, yeah. I remember when you went through that, and I always valued you and looked up to you. And I remember when I was getting out, I got heavily recruited by the law enforcement, and I was about to do LAPD. I was about to do Miami. I was on my way, and then I had a discussion with a lot of homies from the hood, and it was a two-way. It was a conflicted discussion, but a two-way discussion, talking about the verbiage they use towards law enforcement, F the police, right? So it's like, my boy was like, if JR is going to be a police officer in Compton or Long Beach or LA, and y'all saying F the police because you don't like the uniform and the way that the police is policing the neighborhoods, and your little homie take him out, how would you feel? Man, whole room, people cry, like the homie's crying now. Like, we didn't look at it like that. And I started to give them the opportunity to talk, like, this is how it is. How would you feel that I got out the military? Yes, I got damaged and beat up, but now I want to come serve my own community, and somebody that don't know me, that don't respect me because they don't care about the uniform, kill me because it's F the police, and you find out it's someone you grew up with, it's your homie, it's me. How would you feel? How would that DP go? How would that situation go? So everybody talking, and then all the brainwaves just start to come together. And from that conversation on, I was like, I can't do this because it's a real situation. Y'all, because it's a war in our internal neighborhoods where it's us against them, where it shouldn't be. That's not why the force was created, I believe. I believe that it was created for real criminals, but not because your uncle, your father, your brother, somebody you know, getting out the military, want to do right. And that's the only way we thought in the military that I could do right is come back, give it to my neighborhood. But we found another way. We'll talk about it later. To be in law enforcement, and just because you don't like the police, you take me out. And I used to always be scared of you because you would call me and tell me, hey, I picked up your other cousin. He had on your uniform. Is this your cousin? On my other side, I'm like, yeah, that's him. He can't be wearing your uniform out here, because I used to come back from the desert and I used to give my uniforms to my cousins, like, hey, this is a gift from me. I made it back from this deployment. They rocketed it as fashionable. You pull them over. Remember, it was Pete McIntyre. You pulled him over. You was like, is this really your cousin? Because he got your uniform on, and I'm going to tell him to take it off. I said, that's him. That's on my other side of the family. But that's the tension in the neighborhood. How did you grow up in Long Beach, go to the military, come back, and become a police officer in the same area you grew up in? How did you feel?
I loved it. All I wanted to do was do that. So when I got hired as a city cop, I had already been a police officer for the federal side for about 4 years almost. So I started exactly at 21 and retired at 42. So, but I had to tap out. I was done. Mentally, emotionally, I was 100% burnt out. I was drinking too much, ended up going to rehab. I got myself arrested because of my anger and certain things I don't tolerate in my brain anymore. Right. It's a little altered.
Yeah, definitely.
So it is what it is. But I use it really to my advantage. And so I preach a lot of that to the first responders and the people in the community. And so the conflicts that you have in the community is really because of communication, right? So there's a culture clash between cops and citizens. And that's part of one of my books that I'm writing about, A Thin Gray Line, the culture between the cops and the streets.
Right.
Because I specifically speak about that, given that my brother sold dope. We all grew up with Snoop Dogg. We're all good friends. Like, that's my family. His mom raised me.
Right.
We got family on both sides of the hoods in the cities, right? So, even going to funerals can be a little goofy,
Yeah, definitely.
But then as a cop, it's funny because one thing I find always funny is you know people from the street.
Right.
But then you get to know them on the law enforcement side, and you're like, oh, this.
Yeah.
Then you start seeing some people's real true colors.
Real
right?
true colors,
Then
yeah.
you guys go in there, it's like, and everyone dropping dimes on everyone, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so when you start, especially when you start giving people long numbers of time, it's like, hey, by the way, you think you want to help us, or would you look at like forever?
Yeah.
And it was like, hey, let me tell you something, right? So a lot of people flip. And when I got in, I really just wanted to be a positive influence to the community, because not everyone can be a basketball player,
Right.
a football player,
A rapper.
or a rapper. And that's like really the three main jobs that people are trying to do, right?
In our inner cities. Yeah.
That's just because that's their fast way out. And a lot of that is because you like education. So it's hard for a child or a person, younger person, to want to be in college and have these careers
Right.
when their mothers either didn't go to college or their education stopped in 1965, right? So like they're dealing on information that is that old. So for me, I've always wanted to influence and say, you know, especially as a cop, you know, I was in the gang file when I got into the city because of my family's background. And so that was kind of used against me. Now, on the flip side of that, later on in my career, it was just like you were recruited.
Yeah.
I mean, the government works a certain way. I mean, and they recruit people for certain things. That's how I got involved with the government. And that part that growing up in the hood was a little rough and was different. It was very advantageous for my career to let me be effective and influential.
Right.
And I think that's what has been able to allow me in my career to work in my city. I lived in my beat.
Right. Definitely.
And you
right
know,
there. I know. Right there.
Know. So
that's
it
very
was like,
rare.
but it is rare.
That's rare.
But because I knew the city, and I've never was a disrespectful cop, and I'm going to talk about what you had talked about for a second on the retaliation against the police. I was never that type of officer. Like, I just didn't do that. Like, I gave people, you know, my whole point is to try to help the community and save. And not every answer is jail. Like, I've had guys with AIDS and hepatitis stab me, or, you know, with drug needles, or I've been spit in my eye by very nasty individuals. And so, but some of them just need to go to the hospital.
Right.
Now, the inside of me wants to be like, I want to take
Brad,
your whole
yeah.
grill out your mouth, but
Yeah.
you know, you can't
do that. Yeah.
Right? Because you're an actor.
Right.
And when you're at work, you got to pretend that what? You care about everyone.
Right. Definitely.
Right? I mean, that's just what you get paid for.
Yeah.
And so
Hearts and minds.
that's why when people get in trouble, it's always for violating in the performance of their duty.
Right.
So the word performance means you're doing what? Performing.
Yeah.
So you get paid to perform, no different than an actor is paid to perform as a character.
Right.
So when you can transition your mindset to understand that, you're just kind of like, I think it helps make you deal with things differently.
Right.
It's still hard to deal with hardships in the community when you start dealing with life, fatalities, you know, and you start seeing people dying. It's tough.
Right.
And it's really extremely tough, especially in a unique situation like me, where we've had family friends that, you know, that I grew up with, and I roll to their homicide scene.
Right.
You know, and they're dead. And I have to now pretend I don't know who this guy is, but that's my son's godson. But my partners don't know that.
Yeah.
So I can't show that son.
A separate life. Yeah. You can't.
So I have to keep my pseudo self on at all times.
Crazy.
Because my true self really wants to be emotional and get wrapped up.
Right.
But I can't. See, I'm not allowed to.
And how did that protect the genuine side of Alex Harris? Because I said that on a last podcast where when I was going to war, I did back-to-back in Iraq tours, 3. I saw a lot. How did I protect JR? So I created an avatar called Tactical JR, where he would only go with me downrange, and whatever I saw, I would try not to bring JR there, Gerald.
Mm-hmm.
And I would try not to bring Tactical JR back stateside. The confliction was once I got back and it started to be a meltdown. You growing up in the city and you experiencing all this, and you got your dad, my grandfather, got Ricky, your brother, my uncle. You got Snoop. You got all these people that's supporting you, that's in your ear, but you got to do a job now. And like you just said, you responded to a scene and you saw someone you knew and you couldn't tell them you knew him because it would cause conflict inside your police force. They would probably remove you, but you want to get the information so you can deliver it well to the family because you love this man. How did you deal with that?
It was tough. To this day, I mean, he was my best friend. Always is. That's my son's godfather. I went to his funeral in my police uniform. And the reason why I did that is because he always respected me for me. Just like now how I can be in the neighborhood and people are like, oh, that's just, that's Alex.
Yeah.
You know how it is. But am I around people who have some very violent past? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, that's not my business.
Right.
That's theirs. And I'm not part of that performance. But I also believe those individuals need an outlet, right? I mean, those people need positive people too. Like, hey, how do you get out of that? Because we had to talk the other day about you in your 60s and you still gangbanging, right? And I'm like, bro, you're at the funeral, you're 64 and you're still like, hey, on the hood. I'm like, hey, bro, how about on some retirement? Like on Social Security or something, right? Just like, what are you going to keep doing, my guy, right?
Yeah.
But you can't get mad because the mental capacity is all he knows.
That's all they know, though.
Listen, and that's so you just have to again accept it.
Right.
You can't get upset. You can't get mad and over that. All you can do is try to influence the best you can.
Right.
But some people you can't because that's just what they know. That's what they like. So they're accustomed to. To change that, and especially at a certain age, you'll really screw some people up.
Right.
So when I got out of law enforcement, I knew it was time for me to go. Like it was like genuinely, mentally, physically. The day I made the mental decision,
that was it.
I was like, I never went back to my office. I left whatever was in there. I don't even know what was in there. I know I had some computers. I just left. I didn't even care. I was like, I'm done. As of this day, there would be no involvement. So like if you walked in my house, you wouldn't know I was in law enforcement. No, in fact, most people don't know unless they get to know. And you know that. Most people don't know that until they get to know me.
Right.
But I had to live a private life too because I was wrapped up with the government and other things. And so that's not really advantageous to a point.
Right.
And so you kind of have to live this pseudo life of secrecy.
Right.
And the further you are in things and undercover stuff you get in with some other stuff that some people do that I had no interest in getting in.
Right.
You have to even go deeper into that, right?
Right.
And then again, it's like, is it worth it for really a paycheck at the end of the day?
Right.
When one of our partners got shot on his 4th day, he was, that was the end of it. And it's just like, you have to think about that.
Right.
So how can we impact that? And that's just only being by creating influence.
Right,
definitely. And touching back on what you were saying, when we have these culture battles between law enforcement and cops, the problem is we have a communication issue.
Right.
And that communication issue happens because the cops really don't understand the community they're serving because the majority of them aren't from there.
Right.
And the ones that are from there, like myself, get so scrutinized that you have to be ultra cautious and careful at work because then they could get you on some kind of, oh, you're affiliated. Like I've been under investigation so many times. I was in internal affairs at one time. I went through every single person all the way up to the commander. I used to just walk in there and give them a wave because I was like, I know it's going to be some. I've never gotten in trouble, but it was always, hey,
we heard.
we got this complaint. Oh, hey, we got this, and you weren't nice to this guy. And it was always something. And it was, after a while, you had to be too friendly with people who were not friendly with you, which I get, right? You're not really. The friendly police is relative, but sometimes you just got to talk street to people. Sometimes,
you got to, yeah.
Sometimes definitely. You're like, sir, can you not point the gun at me? Like sometimes they don't understand that, but if you don't drop that effing gun, I'm going to shoot you. It's like, oh, I got you. Let me put that down right now for you, right?
Definitely.
And sometimes you have to transition.
Right.
And how do you transition? It's a day-by-day thing. It's a moment-by-moment thing, and it's also scenario-based and who you're dealing with.
Definitely.
Not everyone is like that, so when I got into rehab and really, stop drinking and really addressing my mental health issues, that one I kind of knew I had, but like it really wasn't impacting me. I was a functional, what they would say, a functional drunk. I was a functional mental health patient and drunk at the same time, alcoholic. And I controlled the prescription.
Right.
But at some point, all that catches up to you.
Right.
You're going to fail somewhere. Life got a way of, cracking you. And for me, when I got arrested and my anger was to another level, I was like, I gotta let all this off, especially being in higher management on the law enforcement side at such a younger age. There was a lot of things that I dealt with, especially when you're in your 30s, 40s, and you got guys who are in their 50s who got 15 years on you, and I'm their boss's boss, and then it's like, then it becomes offensive.
Yeah,
and it's like, who are you to talk to me like that? And it's like, okay, well, you got to respect how we're old.
Right. My name is Dr. J.R. McIntyre. I'm a certified motivational speaker and a social media influencer, and I can't wait to teach you how to excel your real estate business on the LinkedIn platform. LinkedIn is actually the most underrated social media platform. In my class, Elevate Your Real Estate Success for LinkedIn Mastery, you will learn 3 key principles. Number 1, how to generate your high quality leads. Number 2, get personal branding and excellence. Number 3, strategic networking strategies. If you want to be a disruptor in the real estate industry, this class is definitely for you. I'll see you online, and I can't wait to take your LinkedIn profile to the next level. JR out. Boom. Right. I had that conversation probably a couple of weeks ago with me transitioning what I'm doing now and getting my doctorate, and got my master's, and got my project management certification and working in the project management world. And when I come in, I got military experience. I got all these things, and the military pays us to get our education. But when we get into corporate America, it's kind of offensive when we go there because they don't want us there, because we outrank the highest person there. Not only because of leadership in the military, we took the special time to go get educated, and we have experience. So it's like we'll interview you, but we won't accept you. And if we hire you, you will work in this because we don't want you here. So I after I went bankrupt with my company and I worked as a janitor, I worked to get my certifications up. And when I got hired for the 6-figure job that I wanted, they didn't want me. They wanted me, but they didn't want me. Right. And it's kind of hard because I am controlling superintendents that are 65, 70 years old that never seen, excuse my French, an African-American male that's educated, military taught, and experienced. They didn't want to take instructions from me. So the first time I went into the field to go give them instructions as a project manager, one of the superintendents that worked for me said, "I'm going to get you fired." That was his first words to me. Why? Because you never saw, so you the fear of unknown. And it kind of made me frustrated because it was like I worked this hard to fight for my country. And if I came in without no education, you're going to put me in the entry level because I'm just military. But if I came in with all these certifications and I'm educated, you're going to put me here because I deserve to be here, but you're not going to give me the respect. So that's when I transitioned 2 months ago to said, I'm walking away from that job and I'm going to continue what God's given me as my gift and follow my gift as a life coach, motivational speaker, because I'd be damned if I put all this work in and y'all tell me how to go, where to go, and when I get there, you still don't want me? I want to be somewhere where people accept me and where I want it. I want to be behind this mic where I'm talking to my aunt getting tidbits. I want to be speaking on stages like I did Saturday because I think that's where God wants me to be. That's my gift. And I understand you because it's hard where you worked all this hard way from 20 to 40 and you're commanding people that's 65, 70 years old that don't want you to be there. And every day they're going to sabotage things you do.
So you spoke about that, and at the conference we talked about that.
Crazy.
Sabotages, and it's really bad internally, culturally, especially because you're dealing with a lot of uneducated people who don't have the belief because they don't have any stimulus. Right? There's nothing that gives them a path. Right. And one thing I constantly say that you heard me say is the benefit to having vision is you know where you're going, and it simultaneously lets you know where you're not going. Right. That's why I hate being lost, even on GPS. Right. Like, I don't even want to be lost in my car. Right. Like, it irritates me. Yeah. Because it's a form of loss of control, and it's like you got to figure yourself out. So it's like, hold on, regroup. Right. So it's it's like that in our community. Our community needs regrouping, but it needs to have regrouping by individuals who can really relate to the group, the internal side of the culture, and the other side of the culture. And one thing that makes me unique, and that numerous people have asked me to talk to, coming public now has been, I've only been really public for maybe 3 months, right? And so it's a very unique thing that when people get to know me, they're just like, that's bananas.
Wow.
And I'm like, I know it is. Trust me, I've seen it. Right. So it's almost unbelievable.
Yeah.
But because of my authority in these subjects and my background, it's like, well, I know he's not making it up. No, he really got pictures and he's got receipts, and, so now it's like, well, what can we do? Right. So I'm retired. I'm in a very good position. You're retired. Now it's like, what do? We don't just go work for someone and die, because that's why I don't believe we're here for a purpose, and we have to serve within our purpose. Right. And we've always been aligned, and it just was like when you didn't know, you was like, oh, I didn't know you really be talking. I was like, yeah, I just couldn't be public, but I do a lot of that. Like when I speak with first responders, and it's all confidential. You can't know that, right? But there's a lot of first responders who are homicidal, suicidal, and
like veterans.
But they can't say nothing. Yeah. Right. So what do we do for these people? Because now these people are going out in the community, and that's why we're having these culture clashes.
Right.
And that's why we're seeing the things, George Floyd, the crimes and the issues that we're having, is because it's a communication issue between the community that it serves and the community that which lives there.
Right.
So there's some imbalances there. And because of that imbalance, it goes out. And unfortunately, when you're in a law enforcement position, it never looks good. Like, one thing people don't understand is whenever you get a use of force, an officer has to use a baton or whatever it may be, it never looks good. And people are like, did you see him on the news hit a stick? And I'm like, have you ever hit a stick on a tree? Like, it doesn't look good. I don't care if you hit it on a stick or person. Like, no one wants to get hit with a stick, right? So it's there, but there's more to it. And when people don't understand it, and especially when they're like, well, there's all these other alternatives.
Right.
That's hindsight, right? That's that's like watching a NFL game after the game, and you're like, "Come on, bro! You could have seen right there." Like, well, at the time, that's the best decision. Right. And sometimes we lack education, even as police officers. You got to remember, for the most part, to be a cop, you only need a high school education.
That's it. Yeah.
But you're enforcing laws,
right?
And you control attorneys have to deal with and enforce. Right. So then it's like, well, how much knowledge do you really have?
Doing paperwork and all that, yeah.
So you start getting in there. And then that's why we have a lot of issues. You got cops who don't know how to write reports, because why? Right. They're not educated folks themselves. They just went to high school. Right. And some of them went to high school 15 years ago, and they're like, hey, I got to find me something to do. Right. And then you get excited about the job, driving 100 miles an hour, going to pursuits and do stupid stuff. But internally it eats you up.
And that's why we do what we do. And that's why I wanted to bring you on and bring you to the full circle or redefined mindset, because I feel like going through all this, experiencing it with you, and, before we hit on my mom, I feel like creating the Hood Motivator was my bridge to the Hood military and education, because I don't have to go get anything after I retired. But I wanted to show my community, and I wanted to show my world, my veteran world, and I wanted to show the people that have given up on other situations that you can do it. I start my doctorate next month in 2 weeks. I got heavily influenced by Granddaddy Harris, your father. He was a doctor in theology. I did not know I was going to even want to go get a doctorate, because I thought I was just going to be tactical JR. I'm going to do some bodyguarding. I'm going to do some Krav Maga, and I'm going to be out there, and I'm going to do what I have to do as a gentleman. Not knowing where God was teaching me my warrior capabilities still, but he wanted me to speak like this and bridge the gap. Because when people see this, they stop at this, but not knowing that I served my country for 14 years. I got a Bronze Star in combat. I'm working on my doctorate. I got a master's of business, because I saw you.
I remember when you got your hands shot. I remember looking at it.
I got a Bronze Star. You know what I'm saying? I did all that, but I feel like if we don't be stand-up guys to what we're doing right now and saying, hey, enough is enough, because the systems, like you said, is not talking to each other, but they don't want to talk. You just went to a funeral with 60, 65, 70-year-old men, or they still gangbanging. And that was our OGs, and that's what we looked up to. But when we surpassed them, you were square. Not really. I'm not the square. I'm broadening my horizon. Actually, I'm bringing this situation back. And what's crazy is that's what influenced me to keep going what I'm doing now. I speak October 16th at my high school in Long Beach because I feel like we never had that situation that looked like us. Right?
Correct. We didn't.
We had
Like,
sports players, we had rappers, we got Snoop, we got Ricky. Ricky's my uncle. Ricky's your brother. But we could bring them back. But how can we bring regular guys like us that served our country, that served as a police officer, that's saying, hey, I saw both sides of the spectrum. This is where you should go, kid. So tell us about Redefined Mindset.
So Redefined Mindset is really what I call the darker sunshine experience. And what it is as a whole is really a reflection upon my life personally and some of the things that has influenced my life that I've seen from an abstract view, right? And so what I've discovered about all of it, and even in myself, especially when I was sitting in my cell and I had a lot of time to think to myself.
Yeah.
You get a lot of time in prison, literally, or jail,
Yeah.
whatever, in your cell.
Yeah, definitely.
It was definitely a lot of time. In fact,
Yeah.
I started one of my books, the PTSD Inside Me.
Okay.
I actually started with my little gel pen that was so flexible that it's bending, right? But what it made me think about is the rise and fall that I'm referring to is for us, the beginning.
Right.
The rise out of what we came from,
Right.
right? My sister, your mom, living downtown LA, Skid Row.
Skid Row. Can you talk about that real quick?
Man, it's the shittiest place in LA.
No, talk about like that and my mom.
Yeah,
People
and
hear me talk about my mom,
Yeah.
but they don't know. Like, tell people about my mom.
And it's different because you were a little younger,
I was a baby.
but I will never forget. So my mom made me all the time because my dad wouldn't go down at, like, every now and then we'd go to LA, but my mom was like, hey, we got to go give your sister some food. We got to go give her some clothes. And it was always random, which I know you know. And you go in there, it's like, meet me at this random,
light pole
or
pay
something.
phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
when you get out there, there's nothing good about anything around you.
Nothing.
You're like, well, hold on, I don't know if I'm gonna get robbed.
Yeah.
Or, so we have to, to help feed her, and you can see where the demise of addiction. The demise of addiction coming in and impacting. Now, at that age, you don't recognize it. You see it. It's like, it's normal life in theory, right? Because
Right.
we're used to it. It's like, oh, go to see your sisters again,
Yeah.
right? So after a week, every week you do it, it just becomes life. Just like living in a gang involvement dope hood. I mean, it's just like
That's the homie
shit,
over there. That's
right?
what's
Like,
the name.
that just- that's what happens.
Yeah.
But that's really not. That is a way of life, but that's not really life.
Right.
And so I knew when we had, when we were dealing with Renee, from like as my parents had to, and being part of that and watching your sister, and then especially watching her slowly pass away, very, she that was not cool. Like, I mean,
No.
it was an experience that was
Messed
pretty
my head
unique.
up when I was little.
And but it brought a lot of awakening to me because it makes you know, again, it gives you a vision. I don't want to be like, this is not cool. And I didn't really know what addiction was, right? Like, not until later on in life. But that's a hard thing to battle. It's a very hard thing to battle, especially when you may not know it's an addiction or you don't perceive it as an addiction. When I was in rehab for substance abuse, which is alcohol, I didn't really think I was addicted because I can control it. And there are different theories if you want to get in the Blue Book, and I'll have this conversation with anybody because there is a difference. So I wasn't really addicted. And for me, it was a scapegoat 100%. Like, I go to the bar and like just get out of control with it. But what happens is people who have these addictions, they don't have the resources fundamental, they'll drive, and they don't have any kind of influence to give them there. Or in some of them get in these programs and they don't have a vision for when they leave, nor do they have an outline of how we should live. So we all say, man, just go to rehab, help you get off drugs. Oh, well, it's simple to say. Well, it kind of don't work that way, right? So that's like, hey, I know you went to that murder scene. Just treat it like a grain of salt. Doesn't really happen. You can't treat it like a grain of salt.
Yeah.
So
For real.
and the premise behind that is you have to really acknowledge that it's an issue and how to deal with it and navigate it through life. So redefined mindset was adopted kind of for myself, and it's all about redefining mindsets. You don't need to change people, and in some people you can't. And in leadership, I found this very interesting. When I was around a lot of people who were just 20-year veterans, and I'm like, dude, you're like the lowest, like you're at the same level you was when you got hired 20 years ago. I couldn't understand that because I'm always like, no, I'm trying to get to a point where by a certain age, I'm gone. Like work should be an option.
Yeah.
But what happens is a lot of people don't have influence to want to do better because, one, they don't know how to do better. They're not training to do better, and they can't see doing better. And then some people don't want to take on the hardships that come with doing better. So as you promote up, you create more potential liability. And some people don't want to deal with that. So when I do redefine mindset, it's all about taking the mind and just kind of retransforming the way you think, which is a lot about thought leadership. And it's just the way you see things. If you see things as a negative, like a problem, Dr. Miles Monroe speaks about this. If you see something as a problem, and it has a connotation to be a negative, but you could also inverse that to be an opportunity of growth. Like I was dyslexic. Math to this day is still a problem with me. And I have postgraduate degree levels like at this point, but I still struggle with it. But I had to take like statistics 4 times because my brain was like, I can't get it, right?
Yeah.
So I said, I know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to do every single class there needs to be for my degree, right? I'm going to make my math class the only one class.
The last
and I
one.
ultimately passed it with a C, and I was like, man, I just thought I was great. But I graduated with 3.4 GPA average, which is in contrast to graduating from school where it was 999 students and I was 996. So,
yeah,
and then when I went to law school and, start going to work on my PhD programs and I'm doing better. And I didn't quite understand that because you would think school gets harder, but I tell people, no, your hardest degree is your bachelor's degree. After that, it's just like kind of an overdrive. Like this is easy. You want to talk about writing, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that's what kept my drive going. And so one thing I met about redefined mindset is we all talk about it. Even to this day, there's a lot of leadership courses and teachers or coaches. But what we lack is the fundamental play-by-play book of how do we implement that when we go. So my book that I wrote is called, which is Redefine Mindset, and it's about the transformative process. It's really taking a guy or a person, whatever when I identify as per se as a person, from one point to another, regardless of your status. So you can go from the crabs in a barrel bucket like we did and say, okay, how do I get out of this? Now, we can all tell everyone, hey, be motivated.
Right.
You can do it. But how do I do that?
Right.
So when I get out of the bucket, what's my next step?
Yeah.
Like I crawled out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's like, well, you got out of it.
Yeah. What's the next step?
Okay, you out. And so I think there's a gap between how to leverage or not leverage, but to gain the next level of, what's the timeline? Like in the military.
Right.
You can go to the military and not know how to wash your clothes.
Right.
When you leave, you're going to know that.
Yeah.
So when they prepare you to be independent and they prepare you to live a life,
right,
you know how to do those skills. You know how to wash dishes.
Right.
You know how to fold your clothes.
Right.
You know how to make a bed.
Right.
So those are all steps.
Right.
So when you do transition out of the military, you're like, oh, I know how to wash my clothes.
Right, yeah. Definitely.
I could, because they start you from the beginning.
Yeah.
But what they don't teach you is what's the next step after you walk out that gate when you're discharged.
Exactly. And that's why we're doing it.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, you're a veteran.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm a veteran. What do I do?
Yeah.
That's why the VA is a problem because there's nobody's
teaching you those steps.
Those insides of how you actually do this stuff, right? So, it sounds good.
Yeah.
It all sounds good.
Right.
But how do we realistically do it? And, for poor people, for people who come from generational wealth.
Right.
Some people like from us, we're like the first generations of like, hey, we got to grind.
Right.
How do we get together and like make this grind thing happen?
Right. Yeah.
So that's part of what my book is. It's really from a simplistic view, very basic about fundamental beginnings of changing and developing your mindset.
Right.
And that's what it's all about.
Right.
How do we alter and change the thinking?
Right.
And then once you start grasping, okay, I can change it. Now it comes down to how do I execute that thinking? So what's the tool that I use? You're saying I need tools.
Right.
But is this a wrench?
Right.
Or are we talking about a hammer?
Right. Definitely.
You're just saying go get some tools and get some training and start reading a book.
Yeah.
Okay, well, which book specifically will kind of help me work on the issue of I don't have anything. How do I develop something?
Right.
And what's nothing?
Right.
You know, and that's where people have to understand the measurement of success is really the measurement of yourself from one point to another. Mm-hmm. And especially like us and this hip hop culture, right? Everybody want to be a rapper. I want to be a rap like him because he makes this, he makes that. But there's ways you have to do everything.
Levels.
Correct.
And understand your niche, right? Understand who we are. And I think that what we're doing now is definitely aligned with what God wants us to do for our community. And that's why we are able to do it so naturally, right? So we knew already. We tried everything. And we did it all. And we did it really well. Military, police officer, all that stuff. Now,
we went to school. I mean, we're top educated in our family. Like, there's a lot of positive things that we've done. So it's not impossible. Right. We're not rich.
No.
But, you know, so if we can do it, but how do you do that?
Yes.
And that's where it's at now.
Yes.
So when you get when you're at Jordan High School, like I told you, I like talking to the high schoolers because I think at that 9th grade year is really where you like, man, dude, I can honestly get a job,
right?
Or am I going to be hanging out with the homies?
With the homies all day. Yeah,
I mean, when you're in junior high school, you're still like kind of kiddish, but now you're on that transition.
Right.
In 3 years, you either on your own, you better have some kind of focus or goal. But how do you create that?
Right.
Should I be going to get a vocation?
Right.
Or should I be getting a degree?
Or a trade?
But listen, what's your drive?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know their drive because they haven't been influenced on anything.
Right.
All they know is, well, you know, my dad was this, my dad was that, and it's normally not always positive. It's like, well, you know, they can still be that and you can be this.
Because we don't show them enough, right? And they don't have enough options. All they have is one aggressive option, which is football, basketball, hip hop, and that's all good. Get you out the hood. But this is another option I want to open up for them is you can also be a motivator. You can also be a life coach. You can also start your own business. You can also say, you know what? I failed and I was in jail and I was in the psych ward and I was an inpatient, but look what I'm doing now. And that's what I wanted to touch in this quick, conversation. Like, hey, world, this is my uncle. This is my family. But who are you now? This is what you're doing. And you was heavily influenced, by what you saw, and I was heavily influenced by what you are doing. And now we are aligning, and I appreciate you.
No, I think that was dope. I was just like, man, we can do it because I think that's really what it takes. It takes, I'm not prestigious. I'm not anyone, but I'm just saying there are other alternatives, but we're also missing in our culture, in our community.
But you are prestigious. I'm telling you that. To me, you have always been. I don't care.
Oh,
I'm telling you, you have always been to me. So everything you said to me to this point, I have looked up to. Certain things I have took from your toolkit and put in my rucksack and said, I'm going to carry this along the way. How I talk, I got that from Granddaddy Harris. How I talk and hold my conversations from you. How you told me, hey, get your butt into the military. I was questionable because I was like, you know what? It's not going to be accepted by the hood. But you told me, F the hood to go do it. And I did it. A lot of the uncles told me, and I'm telling you now on a public stage that I appreciate you. Even with my security business, you helped me start that.
Yeah.
You told me, you gave me warnings, but you helped me start it.
You
helped me
right path.
Pushed it, and you helped me, and I just reformed it to who I was, into martial arts, into bodyguard, and to taking it to another level.
Yeah, you did. You started having around superstars, everybody, this and that. But
I appreciate you.
That's what I did.
Right.
But and in our culture, that's one thing I can touch on. We are very greedy with information.
Come on, gatekeeping. And I spoke about that.
That you did.
Yeah, and that's why I want to give you your flowers that you don't know. You got your own children, but at the end of the day, I'm telling you, as your nephew, that's a couple of years younger than you, I appreciate you because you saw things that I didn't see, and you helped me even understand or overstand the situation with my mother. I never was able to forgive my mom until now because I had to understand everything she went through as a mom in Long Beach, Compton, LA, drug dealing, on drugs, having us, but she didn't have that vision. She didn't have nobody in her ear like you was in my ear. And I wish someone was in her ear because I would love for her to be here to see this conversation.
Yeah,
and I
she was
appreciate
so young.
you.
I mean, you know,
She died at
my
33.
sister died at 34 years
34
old.
years
I mean,
old.
so it's in a horrible death.
Man, I saw my mom die. Like, I watched her die.
Yes.
I was there the night she died. And I was a kid. And I told myself, I don't have a mom no more, so I'm not listening to nobody. I don't have nothing to say to nobody because I'm the baby. But like I said, I appreciate you because you came through all the time and you helped bridge that gap between me and my sister. You know, my sister's healed now. And it brings me to
We've
tears.
been on some missions.
We've been on some missions to go grab her out the drug house in San Bernardino.
Yes, sir. We've been on some. People don't understand.
They don't even understand what we've done to put our life
on.
on the line and go get her. But now look at her. When you see your niece, what do you see?
She's doing good. But but again, it's influence. Taking her out of that, we took her, you know.
Out that little fishbowl, put her in a healthy fishbowl, and look at her.
Right, you know, so that's what it's really about. How can we impact lives? And
we do
really, it's just really helping people redefine
your mindset.
Their mindset. It's just about how you're looking at it.
And I love it. I love that you did that. I want you to look in that camera and tell the kids, leave them a tidbit, leave them something inspirational, motivational that they can take. Because I don't care about everybody else's platform. I'm speaking to the youth. The youth. This is what you should do. Look in that camera and let the kids know.
So listen, this is not just to the youth, to anyone. Not younger the better because you get time, right? You get time to be like, I can work on that. Because you could have screwed up at 18, 20. I was a teenage father.
I was too.
So, but now I'm a better grandfather.
Yeah.
Because I had to learn a stupid amount of years of being an absent dad, but not an absentee dad. And I was absent because of my career, right? It took precedence. Like, I'm out here, I'm doing a thing. Just like you would talk about, man, Unc, I'm on another deployment. I see you in a few months. You doing your thing. You wasn't trying not to be the best father.
Yeah,
but that's you being the best father because now the benefits of that struggle is going over there. So if I had any kind of short advice, I would say what you have to do is have tenacity. That means the willingness to want to be better. It's not going to come simple. It's impossible. Because if it was simple, then there would be no struggle, right? Everyone would do it. But find your purpose. And your purpose is that thing that you do with the easiest amount of effort. And something that you like. Sometimes you may just have to start off with something you like. For me, it was just like, I just want to be a cop. No, I didn't know if I was going to be a cop. I just wanted to do, that was like, I found it interesting. And then as I went through that process, I was like, hey, I want to learn more. So that's what you can do, not just as a kid, but as a person, no matter where you're at. You're not stuck. You're not stuck. Even if your family is jacked up and at the lowest level on food stamps and you sleeping on the floor, that doesn't mean you can't get an apartment and then go get you a house. It doesn't mean that. It just means you have to accept where you at and say, how can I do this? How can I get to that other place? So you got to find some mentors and some influence, even if that's listen to the Hood Motivator, giving me, other people, and just question life. Question life. And sometimes what you really will find out is as you're starting to progress, life will get harder. And for the younger cats, you're going to look different because you're going to be more focused at a younger age where you have your younger peers who are unfocused because they're young doing their thing. But stay resilient, and that's consistent. That means resiliency is no matter how hard life gets and you knock down, you're going to stand back up. The whole analogy of you fall 7 times, you rise 8. Stay focused, stay motivated, stay positive. You absolutely can do it.
Boom. And you guys heard it from Alex Harris, Redefined Mindset. I love you, Unc. I appreciate you. I'm giving you your flowers. You are doing it.
Thank you.
My only words to you is, as a life coach from nephew to uncle, is just do it. I'm giving you everything you need to do.
Yes, sir.
And just do it. Don't question anybody. Don't put the blinders on and just do it because God has something special for all of us. And the kids right now, y'all know I got these mugs coming, the Hood Motivator. Check it out, man. I'm going to be on every high school stage. I got these mugs coming. I got my gear coming. Y'all can
There
do
it
pre-sale on my website. God is using all of us, but this is what we do. I'm no longer letting business stand on me. I'm standing on business, and it's game time. Boom. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on.
Always.
You know what I'm saying?
It's a capsule.
Yeah, man.